Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimler's History. Now, we've been going through Unit 2 of the AP Government curriculum, and that means it's time to talk about the federal bureaucracy. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked bureaucrat style, then let's get to it. Okay, so in this video, here's what we're trying to do. Explain how the bureaucracy carries out the responsibilities of the federal government. So let's begin in the beginning. What is the federal bureaucracy? Well, in addition to holding the title for the word I most frequently misspell in this curriculum, the bureaucracy consists of the millions of people who are employed to carry out the responsibilities of the federal government, and which falls under the authority of the executive branch. Remember, the executive branch of the government is there to enforce the laws passed by Congress. In order to enforce those laws, it requires a metric buttload of people. So in order to understand how the bureaucracy works, let's begin with its basic structure. First, you've got the cabinet departments, of which there are 15. For example, you have the Department of Defense and the Department of Education, and we'll talk a lot more about those in the next video, but for now, just know that all the folks that make up the president's cabinet are the heads of those departments. Now, each of those departments are further subdivided into agencies which all work together to accomplish the goals of the department. For example, the mission of the Department of the Treasury is to, quote, maintain a strong economy, and in order to get that done, there are several agencies within that department that work to achieve that end. For example, you have the Internal Revenue Service, which is responsible for collecting taxes and deciding how and when that occurs, and you also have the United States Mint, which coins and prints all our money. Okay, then under the heading of bureaucracy, we have independent regulatory commissions. They're independent because they operate somewhat apart from the president's authority, but they're still associated with the executive branch. And these commissions do what their names suggest. They are created for the specific purpose of regulating some aspect of society. For example, we have the Federal Communications Commission, which is responsible, in addition to its many other responsibilities, for making sure potty-mouth language doesn't end up on our television broadcast. Thanks to the FCC, I could not go on television and say, and I definitely could not talk about how you know what I'm saying? Anyway, the final kind of bureaucratic entity you should know about is the government corporation. This is a kind of hybrid between a government agency and a private business. When there are services that the government wants to offer to the public, but the free market is the best way to do it, then a government corporation is created or acquired. So the next time you go outside to check the mail, you can think about government corporations, because one of the biggest of these is the U.S. Postal Service. Okay, so that's the basic structure of the bureaucracy. Now let me briefly tell you about what these entities do in order to carry out the will of the executive branch. First, these organizations write and enforce regulations. For example, if you've ever seen closed captions on a video or TV screen, that's because in the mid-90s, the FCC made it a rule that closed captions be included for those with disabilities. There are a few exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, if you want to broadcast a show on TV and you don't include the closed captions, the FCC is going to get you. Which brings us to the next thing these organizations do, namely issue fines for non-compliance. If you decide that the April 15th deadline for filing your taxes just doesn't appeal to you, then maybe the IRS is going to slap a fine on you quick, fast, and in a hurry. Or another example, if businesses don't abide by the provisions of the Clean Air Act and pollute the environment to their little heart's content, well, the Environmental Protection Agency is about to hit them with a fine. And that's what's known as compliance monitoring. Now, the third thing these bureaucratic organizations do is interact with Congress. The department heads are often experts in their field, and they'll go to congressional committees and testify on behalf of the dealings of that agency or their department. Now, these bureaucratic agencies often work very closely with congressional committees and interest groups, and when they do so, this relationship is called an iron triangle. These three entities work together and rely on one another's strength in order to make policy. Bureaucrats offer expertise to congressional committees with whom they are eager to cooperate, since it's Congress who approves funding for their departments. Committee members want to pay attention to interest groups because they often have policy experts who can inform them of the implications of certain policies, and interest groups can provide funding for congressional races. And if interest groups help these Congress people get elected, then they will likely provide funding for a bureaucratic agency that will address the interests of the interest group, and on around the triangle we go. Now, these days, iron triangles aren't as prevalent as they have been in the past, and that's partly because the number of competing interest groups have multiplied dramatically. Another reason is the prevalence of issue networks, which have worked to weaken iron triangles. So for example, an iron triangle that formed around tobacco interests could be severely disrupted by an issue network, which is a conglomeration of a bunch of folks who sometimes disagree about a lot of things, but they come together around one specific issue and seek to effect change. If one of these issue networks is alarmed that so many Americans are using tobacco, then they have influence to break the triangle. Okay, we done got ourselves into the weeds of how the bureaucracy works, and now we need to finish by talking about how the efficiency of the bureaucracy has changed over time, and really this has to do with how people come to work in the bureaucracy. Now, back in the days of Andrew Jackson, getting a job in the bureaucracy was the result of something called the spoils system. You know that saying, to the winner goes the spoils? Well, that's the idea of the spoils system. In Jackson's day, when the president won an election, that meant that he had hundreds of bureaucratic jobs to fill, and so he would give them to those who were not necessarily qualified qualified for the jobs, but rather those who supported his candidacy. As you can imagine, such a system can go sideways pretty quickly, as it did in 1881 in the assassination of President James Garfield. Just like every president before him, Garfield began his term by hearing from thousands of applicants for bureaucratic jobs, people who had helped him get elected. And there were way more people applying than there were jobs to give out, so some people had to be told no. Well, as it turns out, he told one particular guy named Charles Guiteau, "No job for you," and in response, Guiteau found Garfield at a train station and went ahead and shot him. So that event created the occasion for reform in the way people got bureaucratic jobs, and the word for that is civil service reform. The result was the Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883, which created a merit-based system for applicants seeking jobs in the bureaucracy. Now, jobs went to the people who were actually qualified for them rather than people who just supported the candidate. So, good update. And it helped increase the effectiveness of the bureaucracy since competent people were now working these jobs. Now that reform continued into the 20th century in order to make the bureaucracy more professional and specialized and neutral. Under Jimmy Carter's administration, Congress passed the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, which upheld the merit-based system already in place, but also further expanded opportunities for women to work in the bureaucracy and increased the efficiency of many departments. All right, click right over here to grab a view packet if you need help getting an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May. That was everything you need to know about Unit 2, Topic 12 of the AP Government Curriculum, and I've got a lot more videos coming, so if you're not already subscribed, well, go ahead and hop on that pony and click it, and I'll see you in the next one. Heimler out. I don't know what that means. Hop on that pony and click it? What is that?